name is Zoe Todd, and I'm an Amiskwaciwâskahikan, or Métis woman, from Amiskwaciwâskahikan, also known as Edmonton, which falls within Treaty 6 territory in Alberta. And please be patient with me as I reclaim the language that my grandfather grew up speaking, but which my father and myself didn't learn. Being able to use Nehiyaweyan in the things that I say is really meaningful. So thank you for being here and sharing that with me. I work with fish. What you probably know about Alberta is that it is the heart of the oil and gas industry in this country. But what if I told you a different story about my home province and about this country? A story about it as a fish place. I grew up fishing with my mom and my dad at Baptiste Lake, which is a small kettle lake 20 minutes northwest of Athabasca in north-central Alberta. It is here that I caught my first fish, a tiny little perch, and came to understand the rich and storied worlds of prairie lake fish. What is distressing to me are the reports of fish population decline across the entirety of my home province, which are, according to fisheries biologist Lauren Fitch, intimately tied to wide-scale habitat destruction across the entire province. I've been spending a lot of time in the last few months thinking with some questions and stories that Blackfoot elder, thinker, and philosopher Leroy Littlebear shared in a talk that he gave at the Congress of Humanities in Calgary last spring. In this talk that he gave, he discussed issues of sustainability, ecology, and questions of survival in the face of extinction. One thing he asked, which has stuck with me for all these months since, is whether anyone has asked the fish what they think of the current state of the world's affairs. Someone should ask the fish, he said. So this matters all the more in this day and age when scientists argue that we are possibly in the midst of what may be the sixth mass extinction event, through which we may lose up to 3/4 of the Earth's species within the next few hundred years. Leroy Littlebear's question about the fish makes a lot of sense. As he points out, quote, "The fish has been around, think about it, way before the dinosaurs, way before the Neanderthals, way before our time. The fish has survived," end quote. In fact, some experts argue that fish have existed in one form or another for 510 million years. That's a very long time. But fish are not existing or surviving in this current state of affairs. In fact, all across the globe, fish are facing massive threats to their existence. Ocean acidification, pollution of our waters. We have managed to damage almost every fish habitat around the globe. We have, it seems, downright refused to be good relations to those beings who, as Littlebear points out, have survived a whole lot more than us. In 2012, I had the opportunity to fish with and learn from two phenomenal fishermen from Paulatuck, Andy and Millie Thrasher and their family. From the time they spent taking me on the land with them, I learned so much about the rich and dynamic ways that people in their community work very hard to protect the well-being of lands, water, fish, and other beings. The labor that Andy and Millie and so many other members of their community perform season after season through their fishing and travels on the land in their community helped me to understand the ways that fish in my home territory are themselves political agents embedded in complex relationships with humans and more than human beings, and who deeply shape Indigenous legal traditions. When Indigenous peoples assert their laws in relation to fish and other more than human beings, this is an act of inter-nation diplomacy between Indigenous peoples, the settler colonial nation state, and more than human collectives. These legal ethical principles are rooted in reciprocity and care towards fish and other more than human beings. Therefore, conflicts over governance of lands and waters between the state and Indigenous peoples, and yes, questions about species loss and extinction, should be approached as a matter of legal governance plurality and an expression of Indigenous legal orders and traditions. We must, as Leroy Littlebear advises, ask the fish what they think. And we must also ask ourselves what is required to be better relations to these beings who have existed for hundreds of millions of years, but who have barely managed to survive a few hundred years of settler colonialism in Canada. Canada's relationship to fish in the last 150 years has not been good. In Alberta, in Métis legal traditions, we draw in part on the Cree legal principle of Wokotowin. Ethics of care, reciprocity, and kindness deeply inform how Métis or Otipemisiwak negotiate our responsibilities to one another and to the world. Asking how Indigenous peoples relate to fish as kin is necessary as a starting point for confronting the dire realities that humans and fish alike face in this current era of the sixth mass extinction. Let us imagine a shared ethic of tenderness for one another as citizens bound to this place and so many other places like it throughout the country, through which we can refract the logics which have informed the last few hundred years of extraction and colonialism. Instead, let us be good relations and good kin. Thank you.